2 hours after I signed my divorce papers, I made one phone call that fired every single person my husband's family had planted inside my father's winery over the last 9 years. My name is Margaret Ellison. I'm 34 years old, and I was standing in a parking lot in Napa Valley, still wearing my court clothes, when I made the first phone call that would end 9 years of quiet theft. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From how long I'd been holding this in. My father, Walter Ellison, planted his first vines in 1979 on 40 acres he bought with a GI loan and a lot of stubbornness. By the time I was 30, Ellison Cellars was shipping to restaurants in 4 states. He gave me 30% of the company on my 30th birthday and told me, "This isn't a gift, Margaret. This is a responsibility." I married Colton Vance 11 years ago. His family ran a distribution business 2 counties over, and on paper, it looked like a good match, 2 wine families joining forces. But from the first Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law, Roberta Vance, talked about my father's winery like it already belonged to her son. "Family helps family," she'd say, smiling over the turkey. "Colton's brother is so good with logistics, it'd be a waste not to bring him in." One by one, over 9 years, Vance relatives filled positions across our shipping department, our accounts payable, even our tasting room management. My father trusted me completely, and every hire I recommended, he approved without a second look. It took me most of those 9 years to understand what I was actually looking at. It started small. A shipment of Cabernet that never showed up on the books. A grape supplier contract that quietly transferred to a company registered under Roberta's sister's name, with pricing that was, somehow, always 8% higher than our old suppliers. I told myself it was an oversight. I told myself a lot of things. Then it got harder to explain away. Our tasting room started running special allocation tastings for VIP guests I'd never approved, guests who, it turned out, were friends of Roberta's from her country club, drinking through our reserve inventory for free while the receipts logged them as marketing expense. Then bigger things, barrels of our best reserve wine, the kind we sold for $200 a bottle, rerouted to a storage facility that, on paper, didn't officially exist. I noticed our harvest bonuses to the field crew, the people who'd worked my father's land for 20 years, kept shrinking, while a new consulting fee line item kept growing. I asked about it once in a staff meeting. Colton's brother, who ran logistics, said it was restructuring. Nobody else in the room met my eyes. Around the same time, I started noticing our export paperwork to a distributor in Texas kept getting rerouted through a broker Roberta's nephew had recommended, a broker who took a cut on every case before it even left our warehouse, on top of what we were already paying our real distribution partners. When I asked to see the broker's contract, I was told it was still being finalized, a phrase I heard for the better part of a year. I brought it up to Colton once, gently, over dinner. He laughed. Told me I was being paranoid, that I saw conspiracies where there was just family pitching in. When I brought it up again a few months later, this time with actual numbers in hand, he got cold. Told me I sounded ungrateful for everything his family had done to help us grow, that I was letting my father's old-fashioned suspicion poison a good thing. So I stopped talking. And I started watching. I hired a forensic accountant named Diane Marsh, paid her in cash, met her in a diner off Highway 29 where nobody from either family would recognize us. Every other week, for 8 months, I'd tell Colton I was at a friend's for wine club and drive 40 minutes in the opposite direction to sit across a booth from a woman quietly rebuilding 9 years of my family's history, one bank statement at a time. What she found was worse than I'd let myself imagine. 19 people, all connected by blood or marriage to Roberta Vance, embedded across every department that touched money or product. Combined, they'd siphoned off almost $3 million over 9 years through inflated shipping invoices, phantom consulting fees, skimmed harvest bonuses, the Texas broker's hidden cut, and a storage company that billed us monthly for warehouse space that was, in reality, an empty lot behind a gas station Roberta owned outright. Diane laid it out for me page by page, month by month, until I could see the whole shape of it, 9 years of small, deliberate cuts, each one designed to look like an honest mistake if anyone ever looked closely enough. Nobody ever had. Until now. The night Diane handed me the final report, I sat in my car in that diner parking lot for almost an hour before I could make myself drive home. Not because I was surprised. Because some small part of me had still been hoping I was wrong, that maybe it really was just family, pitching in, exactly the way Roberta always said. I didn't confront Colton with the numbers. I filed for divorce instead. Quietly. Citing irreconcilable differences, giving him no reason to suspect what I actually knew. And I let that report sit sealed in my lawyer's office until the ink on my decree was dry. Some people would call that cold. I call it patient. Because the second I was free legally, completely free of anything that made the Vance family feel entitled to my father's life's work, I could act without an ounce of guilt holding me back. I called my father from that parking lot and told him everything. 9 years, condensed into 6 minutes. The storage company. The phantom invoices. The barrels that vanished. I told him to fire all 19 of them. Effective immediately. Security walking each one out before the end of the day. My father went quiet for a long moment. Then he said one thing, send me the report. Within an hour, HR had the list. Within 3 hours, it was done. That same evening, while I was still unpacking boxes in the small rental house I'd moved into during the separation, Roberta Vance showed up at my door. A woman who had never once raised her voice at me in 11 years of holiday dinners was pounding on my door hard enough that my neighbor's porch light flicked on. Reverse it, she said, before I'd even opened the door all the way. Reverse every single termination, or I promise you, you will regret ever marrying into this family. I stood there in the porch light and, for the first time in 11 years, I felt calm. You need to leave, I told her. She laughed, sharp, bitter, and told me I had no idea what I'd done. That the Vance family had built half of what my father called his winery. That 19 families now depended on those paychecks, and I was starving them out of spite. The only thing anyone's been starving, I said, is my father's business. Slowly. Deliberately. For 9 years. And the report proving every dollar of it is sitting in my lawyer's office. Her face changed. Just slightly. And I knew she understood I wasn't bluffing. She tried a softer approach next. Colton still loved me. This could all be undone. Let bygones be bygones for the family's sake. Wasn't 9 years of marriage worth more than a few misunderstandings over paperwork? I almost admired how fast she pivoted from threats to fake tenderness. The same pivot I'd watched her make at 100 family dinners whenever someone almost saw through her. Misunderstandings over paperwork, I repeated back to her. Is that what we're calling $3 million now? That number landed the way I knew it would. For just a second, the performance dropped completely, and I saw something underneath it that looked almost like fear. I told her there was no version of reconsideration on the table. That if she or her son or any of the 19 wanted to contest it, they were welcome to do it in court, where the forensic report would become public record, along with every name on it. That's when she stopped threatening reconciliation and started threatening lawsuits, her voice climbing again, promising she had connections, promising powerful friends, promising this wasn't over. I let her finish. Then I closed the door, and I stood in my dark kitchen for a long time afterward, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. They didn't, not for almost an hour. But for the first time in 9 years, they were shaking from relief, not fear. The lawsuit never came. Her attorney reviewed the report during discovery and quietly advised her that pursuing it would only invite a criminal fraud referral. The threats stopped as fast as they'd started. The weeks after were harder than I expected, not because I doubted what I'd done, but because untangling 9 years of embedded theft meant rebuilding entire departments almost from the ground up. My father brought in a new operations director, a steady, no-nonsense woman named Priya Nair, to oversee shipping and accounts while we vetted new hires. Within 2 months, delivery delays that had plagued us for years simply disappeared. Supplier costs dropped almost 20% once the shell contracts were gone and replaced with real, competitively bid agreements. The Texas broker was gone within a week, and our export shipments started arriving on schedule for the first time in 3 years. The field crew got their bonuses back that harvest, in full, plus a little extra my father insisted on adding himself. One of the older pickers, a man named Reuben who'd worked the land since before I was born, hugged me at the crush pad and told me my father used to talk about the day I'd finally run things. He just hadn't expected it to happen quite like this. My father called me every night that first month, sometimes just to read me the new numbers. His voice got lighter each time, like a man realizing a weight he'd carried so long, he'd forgotten it was there. Colton called exactly once, 3 weeks later. Quiet, in a way I hadn't heard from him in years. He didn't defend his mother. He didn't defend the 19 names. He just asked how I was doing. I told him I was doing better than I had in years. And I meant it. He didn't call again after that, and, honestly, I think we both understood there was nothing left to say. 6 months later, Ellison Cellars posted its strongest year in company history, staffed entirely by people who'd earned their positions, not inherited them. Our reserve Cabernet, the same wine that had once been quietly siphoned out the back of our own warehouse, sold out in 11 days, and our Texas distribution, finally running through a legitimate partner, grew faster in 1 quarter than it had in the previous 3 years combined. My father named me president that spring, standing on the same crush pad where he'd planted his first vines 40 years earlier, in front of the same field crew who'd worked that land for decades, telling everyone gathered that the winery had finally been returned to the people who actually built it. Reuben stood near the front, arms crossed, nodding along like he'd known this was coming since the day I was born. I stood there in the same gray blazer I'd worn on the day of my divorce, the one I kept specifically for that reason, a private reminder of exactly who I'd decided to become. And for the first time in years, standing on the land my father had built with his own hands, I felt like my life and his legacy truly belonged to me. If this story hit you, you're going to want to hear what happened to the storage company Roberta used to hide the money. That one's coming next. Subscribe so you don't miss it.